The Insider's case. Witness Saktaganov accuses defendants of politicizing a labor conflict, while Boris claims the opposition was doing its job. The open season. The head of state expressed his concern about public order on the streets of Kazakhstan during the opening of the new parliamentary session. A big difference. What defines a social group? What are the signs of incitement of social hatred? Hello, I'm Asylbek Abdulov and you're watching Vlast KZ on K+ channel. Judge Mirzabekov continues to play ball with the prosecution during the infamous social hatred trial. This week, he rejected the request to allow politician Mukhtar Ablazov, chief editor of Golos Respubliki Irina Petrushova, vice president of Open Dialogue Lyudmila Kozlovsky, and others to testify via Skype.
Вице-президента Польского фонда «Открытый диалог» Людмилы Козловской.
Skype conference calls are not a new practice in Kazakhstan courts. During the trial of 37 oil workers who took part in Zhenozhian riots, Skype was used for the testimonies of secret witnesses, with their faces not shown, voices altered. The court had no issues at the time and accepted these testimonies. They were from the prosecution witnesses after all. Of course, a Skype conference with the witnesses of Vladimir Kozlov's defense wouldn't affect the outcome of the trial, but it could have been a highlight of the process and even make it a bit more meaningful. Unfortunately, the entire trial is obviously on rails and continues along its path without unwelcome surprises.
Talgat Saktaganov, who was convicted to 4 years in prison for participating in Zhenozhian riots, was the only oil worker who testified at the trial over Kozlov, Sapargali and Aminov. His interrogation as a witness for the prosecution took almost a full day. The striking oil workers activist appeared tired and angry in the courtroom. I am telling you once more, we had a labor dispute, but our attempts to address these issues were used by them for their own purposes and turned into politics. The judge devoted special attention to Talgat Saktaganov's trip. As part of a delegation of oil workers to Warsaw last fall, Saktaganov made a statement at an OSCE session on the human rights situation in Kazakhstan. I regret very much traveling to Europe because I still do not understand what I went there for. It was a waste of time. In court, Saktaganov repeatedly pointed out that he was disappointed by that trip. In this footage in the fall of 2011, he just returned from Europe. Oil workers were greatly impressed by the meeting with Polish parliamentarians, those of them who actively participated in the Solidarność trade union movement. They carried all these things on their own shoulders. They constrained themselves. They did not oppose the authorities. The authorities provoked the opposition and at the same time did not allow to take actions by making threatening remarks towards their children. It was an important discovery for Zhenozhian oil workers that 30 years ago Soviet Poland went through something similar. In this interview, Talgat Saktaganov shared an experience he learned from conversations with the Polish people. It was about the principles of nonviolent resistance. The Polish counterpart recommended to avoid contradictory actions against the government, or to avoid using arms or something else, or to take any other actions that may be used against you. That's what needs to be avoided, he said. Peaceful, quiet actions need to be taken. Let the authorities do and write whatever they want. If they write, you respond to them by expressing your views in newspapers. Peter Borish also spoke about the oil workers' trip to the OSCE meeting in Warsaw in his testimony as defense witness. This meeting was organized by my colleagues and was devoted to workers' rights, particularly to their rights to formulate demands. First of all, the oil workers were talking about severe conditions of their work, climatic conditions, which they described as severe. They said that they demanded to give back the jobs to dismissed workers. European Parliament's deputy arrived in Aktau on Wednesday. During his speech on the court process, Borish expressed his surprise by the fact that the political activity of the opposition is tried to be presented as something illegal and responsible for the shooting in the square. What is most important now is the court's decision, and I repeat that those who fired need to be punished. In Europe, if there are problems in society, the opposition helps society to point them out. It is normal. They are together with the people. Here, the same thing happened. They did not call for hatred, and we believe that it really was that way. On Wednesday, Markus Leuning, Commissioner for Human Rights of the Government of Germany, also came to Aktau. He asked the court for permission to meet with the defendants Kozlov, Sapargali and Aminov. However, Judge Murzabekov refused Leuning in such a meeting. After that session, the German ombudsman traveled to Zhanaozen. How many more are wounded? Is there a health problem? What kind of help are you getting at this point? Half a dozen people injured in the tragic event gathered at a meeting with the representative of the German government in one of the Zhanaozen courtyards. Because of pressure, some people are afraid to gather. Surprised by this remark, Leuning asked, "Can someone else do anything to you?" The German ombudsman took a look at x-rays and hospital discharge and asked whether the strikers were compensated. People of Zhanaozen, in their turn, applied for help in getting a fair investigation of the December events. Our authorities, so to speak, refer to our citizens as if we do not exist for them, as if what happened did not happen in their country, as if they did not kill our only children. It is like everything is good in the country, all is colorful. We are alone with our grief in the house. Inside the door, the color is black. No other colors we can see. We almost became colorblind. On December 16th, Razia Khan Yusupova lost her son. In this amateur video, someone accidentally filmed how Radik Yusupov was shot. After 9 months, those who were guilty in the death of Razia's son were not brought to justice. Some of the cops who shot him are still free in Aktau. The deputy head of police department, they are given promotions, awards and medals for being good shots and killing people. At the request of the wives and mothers of oil workers, the meeting between Markus Leuning with relatives was held without journalists. The German ombudsman declined to reveal conclusions just yet, but said that his report will be unpleasant for the Kazakh authorities. Coming back to Germany, I have to make a report on the trip and information received and heard from people here. And the next step is likely to appeal to the Kazakh government, because these facts are not thoroughly investigated yet. As to the families of the convicted, they are in a very difficult position, and one of the steps that you can offer is amnesty. Charges are long, and their families are in very poor conditions. Such a move could lead to a reconciliation in the community. No one knows where opposition politician Mukhtar Ablazov's stint as a witness would lead. On Wednesday, Ablazov, who is accused of criminal connections with Kozlov, volunteered to testify in Kazakhstan's court via Skype. Chairman of the editorial board of newspaper Golos Respubliki, Irina Petrushova, editor of Vzglyad, Igor Vinyavsky, vice president of the Polish Foundation Open Dialogue, Lyudmila Kozlovskaya, expressed the same desire. It is noted that the prosecution widely practiced examination of witnesses on Skype at the trial of 37 oil workers. I have never hidden my political views. Kazakhstan should be a free democratic state. Political reform must happen in the country. I am for a parliamentary republic. Human rights activist Yevgeny Zhovtis qualified the judge's refusal to question the witness Ablazov as a display of disinterest towards justice. We are talking about individuals, especially Mr. Ablazov, Mr. Kitibayev, who are repeatedly referred to as witnesses, but they cannot testify, and I do not know the views of those witnesses. In many cases, a reference is made to the words and actions of these witnesses. Finally, in the case of Mr. Ablazov, they are talking about at least 2 pamphlets written by him, and it is obvious that if you want to know whether these leaflets promoted the overthrow of the regime and fueled social hatred, it is logical to ask the author. However, the Aktau political process can hardly be understood as logical. According to The Observer, journalist Sergei Dovanov, the sentence was written long before in the much higher offices. Aktau court's task is to just play along. I believe that the sentence is ready and is waiting in the wings, and that what we see in the courtroom is just an adjustment to this protocol of procedural aspects. At the end of this report, we would like to take another look at the archival interview of the strikers' activist, convicted at the time and now serving as a witness for the prosecution, Talhat Saktaganov. A few months before the tragedy, in that interview, he also spoke about human choice. What is your personal choice then? Choice. The choice is there, but I think the main thing is to convey to the people the right thing, and if they understand, they will unite. They lacked support and consolidation for their fortitude.
Депутат Европарламента Петр Борис.
While commenting on the trial in Aktau, Peter Boris, a member of European Parliament, noted that by definition the opposition must support and help people whose rights are violated. In present situation, the punishment should be directed against those who opened fire at the crowd of unarmed oil workers on December 16th.
Напомнив о жанузенской бойне 16 декабря. Наказание за то преступление получилось неполным.
But not everyone who took part in the massacre was held liable. Only 5 policemen received sentences, although clearly there were supposed to be more. At least 11 shooters are seen on this amateur video.
Точно зафиксировано на этом любительском видео. Белыми пятнами в новейшей истории страны.
The names of those who gave the order to open fire and exact number of victims is a mystery as well. Detectives on the case just ignored individuals, the men in black and people who wore new oil workers' uniforms. Zhanozyen residents didn't recognize them as locals, and these unidentified guests appeared to be in the center of all events provoking a conflict between oil workers and policemen. This past week, some assumptions connected these people with the organized criminal group in the Atrau region closely linked with the family of the recently dismissed governor Birgir Iskaliyev. The ex-official is widely considered a protege of Aslan Musin, and the recent developments could be another blow against the head of the president's administration. The extremely non-public Musin is now in spotlight, especially after a recording of a phone conversation between 2 people, one of whom sounds suspiciously a lot like Musin, on the internet a week ago. Going with the tone of the conversation, this person really runs all the processes within the senior staff and beyond.
Рулит процессами в Акурде и за ее пределами.
The moment we'll be on the same page, I'll be ready to use our services to 100%, but to do this, we have to meet, because otherwise we might end up with a lot of miscommunication on our hands. We might misunderstand each other. I propose you to visit us. The meeting in a neutral area is stupid, as it is not the time to play spy games. Yes, I do understand that you are concerned about a possible arrest. You want. I will personally meet you in the airport and escort you to the president's palace, where we can sit down and talk everything over, and if needed, we can even go upstairs, because honestly, we have issues that need to be resolved now. Later, it just might be too late. You can take my word for it, Victor.
Это разговор годичной давности, и с тех пор многое изменилось.
This conversation was recorded a year ago, and since then many things have changed. Musin's shaky ground is further confirmed by a leak, claiming he already submitted the president his resignation letter, except the head of state declined the request. It is not clear whether the decision was final or temporary, although nothing is really clear in this particular story. Perhaps someone's wishful thinking is presented as a fact to the others.
Желаемое для одних выдается за действительность для всех. Вся президентская рать собралась на неделе в Астане на открытии парламентской сессии.
This past week, all the president's men gathered in Astana for the opening of the new parliamentary session. It seems that the president's speech has never been so insipid, to put it mildly. Even the quite pro-government newspapers wonder why the president's words failed to meet the expectations of the population. The head of the state said nothing of the tragic events in Arkan-Kergen, Aksay-Golch, let alone Zhanozyen. An explanation, if there ever was one. The president is busy settling clan wars, hence the very neutral report.
Занято сейчас другим, разводами клановых войн, поэтому и доклад был столь нейтрален.
Let me go say hello. The MPs greet each other after the summer holidays. Another parliamentary session kicked off this week, launching a new political season. Now there's someone to dismiss. Throughout the summer, the experts have been predicting high-profile resignations and government reshuffles for Kazakh politicians this fall. The hot summer of 2012, with terrorists mopping up operations and high-profile trials, would infer some sort of a summarization. Yet the president chose to speak only on the economic section. Let's say whoever breaks the lantern in the park is not only responsible for its repair, but is also subjected to a couple of weeks of cleaning the streets. You all know how in the United States, for instance, even the movie stars and famous politicians are assigned to community service as punishment for petty offenses. We need simple and clear laws to regulate public order and people's conduct in public. The MPs and parliamentary parties should take more initiative and adopt these kinds of laws. Halfway through the president's speech, the second session of the fifth convocation of parliament slowly started to resemble the session of local government. The MPs need to see things through the lens of ordinary people. People are mainly concerned with services and how warm are their apartments or how safe it is in public places. Therefore, the law must regulate the public places and be more clear to the people. According to political expert and scientist Maxim Kaznachev, strong statements are yet to be made. My impression is that the president and the authorities have not yet decided on the course of further development. While the internal information processing in Acorda is still underway, looks like there will be no political statement just yet. Later in the lobby, at a so-called parliamentary after-party, the MPs were sharing their impressions only about positive things. The MPs should never ignore the national affairs and interests of ordinary people. Instead, they should participate in all activities along with their voters. In the meantime, the eldest daughter of the president, MP Nazarbayeva, apparently was in good spirit. Sure thing, I have nothing against sweeping the streets and digging dirt. I'm very optimistic about our work and our common future in general. I hope you would have plenty of interesting articles and reports to make. In turn, we will apply the fire for you with fresh fuel. However, who would be used as firewood is still not clear. For instance, the presidential advisor Yermohamed Yertizbayev mentioned in his interview this week that the activity of Masimov's government has been rather decreasing lately. Let's leave the president alone for a moment and reflect on the fact that he needs to make much more global decisions on staffing reshuffles based on the need to implement the wide range of the staff turnover, affecting not only the government. Staff turnovers started happening this week, although on a lesser scale than expected. The MP Jacques Passanov has been appointed Deputy Attorney General. According to certain sources, Ahmadjan Ruskali, following his brother, recently resigned from the parliament due to health reasons. The Vice Speaker of the lower chamber, Baktekajais Mukambetov, traded his parliamentary mandate for the chair of Atarao Regional Governor. Thus, 3 spots in the parliament are now vacant. Umirzak Shukeyev has been laid off from Kazatomprom National Company, as officially reported in the media, while the voluntary resignation of Aslan Musin has not yet been confirmed. All groups within the president's circle of close associates will be diminished. This is due to the activities of Aslan Musin and Birgay Ruskaliyev, which just reassured the president that empowerment of any group inevitably undermines his own authority. I believe it's a lesson learned and a very tragic experience as well. Speaking about the possible changes in the alignment of political forces, experts name the institutions which the president might try to lean on during reorganization. Capacities of the parliament can be strengthened. This issue was discussed during the first session. It is still a debatable matter, while the country's elite does not seem to be ready for it yet. However, more than 20 years of Nursultan Nazarbayev's ruling indicate that during moments of challenge, he is not inclined to trust political institutions, but his close relatives. With high probability, we can assume that this is exactly what he is going to do this time around. The rumors about empowering Dariga are actively spreading on the internet, predicting her to become Vice Speaker of the Parliament and the main denouncer. The president's entourage, especially the old presidential guard and the law enforcement system, will be the first ones to be blamed for the situation in the country. The next ones in line are representatives of certain clans and the Prime Minister Masimov, who logically or by agreement would have to resign. Those individuals who would have to take heat will pretend to be sorry for what they've done and admit their fault to a certain extent and publicly quit the political scene. So far, all the big political events in Kazakhstan occur exclusively on the pages of online publications, but it is worth noting that the reports of mass arrests of the official elite in Atarao region were also published on opposition websites. 2 weeks later, these facts were finally confirmed by law enforcement agencies, so now it's the turn of official Astana.
Next on Vlast KZ. A big difference. What defines a social group? What are the signs of incitement of social hatred? Lady Gaga. British tabloids coverage of Kazakhstan's Cinderella. Stay with us, Vlast KZ will return with more in a couple of minutes.
Главные события в Казахстане. Достоверные факты. Эксклюзивные комментарии. Читайте в Казахстане информационно-аналитический портал «Республика». Чтобы обойти блокировки, воспользуйтесь доменом respublicas.info. Вы окажетесь на так называемом прокси-портале. Специально разработанные канадскими специалистами по интернет-технологиям, прокси-порталы помогают пользователям получать информацию в тех странах, где блокируют интернет-ресурсы. В в Китае, Иране, в Казахстане. Вы принимаете условия использования системы и попадаете на страницу информационно-аналитического портала «Республика». Материалы интернет-портала также доступны пользователям всемирной сети Facebook facebook.com/respublica.kaz. Если вы хотите поделиться информацией, вам есть что рассказать, звоните в редакцию «Республики». Наши телефоны в Казахстане +7 727 273 92 95, в Москве +7 495 621 87 03.
Новости Казахстана на казахском языке смотрите в 21:00 и далее каждый нечетный час. Новости Казахстана на русском языке в 22:00 и далее каждый четный час. Новости Казахстана на английском языке смотрите в 16:30, 17:30, 18:30 и 19:30 со вторника по субботу. Время Астаны. Изготовление и размещение рекламы на канале KplusTV.
Продолжаем наш выпуск и вновь вернемся к делу разжигателей.
Let's get back to the case of people charged with inciting social hatred for a moment, shall we? It is now a common understanding that it doesn't have a body of crime. Human rights activists note that the indictment or even expert evaluation cannot explain what were the groups subjected to the incitement of social hatred.
Для российского эксперта Грачева на Октавском процессе
Russian expert Grachev say everything was clear from the leaflets allegedly written by Mukhtar Ablazov. After examining the content, Grachev found the signs of fomentation of social hatred between two social groups, one of which is the government, including its institutions and representatives of President Nazarbayev, and the agencies that carry out his instructions. The second group consists of Mukhtar Ablazov, his supporters and oil workers, who became the means of achieving the goals. Even better, the Russian expert concluded that the leaflets set clear friend and foe dichotomy.
Те нефтяники, которых он хочет использовать в своих целях. Защита Козлова продолжает настаивать, что власть не является...
The defense of Vladimir Kozlov insists that government is not in fact a social group. Along with human rights activists, the attorneys argue that the charges for inciting social hatred and calling to overthrow the constitutional order are inherently political. The vagueness of these claims allows making any dissident liable.
Позволяет подводить под статью любого инакомыслящего.
These luxurious mansions with high furs are not in Switzerland. This is Chimbulak tract near Almaty. The cost of a villa in the exclusive area is estimated to several $1 million. According to the independent media, the owners of this property are located in Astana. The income of most of them grew in direct proportion to the oil production in Kazakhstan. Meanwhile, these are the young residents of the oil city of Zhanaozen. Looking for food through the garbage cans is their daily routine. The Mangistau region, with its annual 20 million tons of oil production index, has one of the highest rates of poverty. According to official statistics, about 6% of the population live below the poverty line in Kazakhstan, with an income of less than $120, which is below the poverty level. There are 20% of those people who don't have enough money even to buy the food products. There is also a 50% of middle class, those who can only afford buying clothes and food products, whereas the rich people who indicated that they can buy anything in our surveys make up about 1% of the population. Janilkhan Kudaybergenova goes to the store to purchase only the most necessary items. Her monthly salary is $67. That's exactly the same amount she pays for the rent of this house. I don't ask for much. Had they paid me the due amount, I would have helped my son to receive an education, to start his own family and build a house. Then I could enjoy my time babysitting the grandchildren. I just want to live like everyone else. Janilkhan's husband worked as a laborer in the Yersai oil company, receiving $167 a month. He participated in the last year's strike demanding to raise his wages. The oil workers' demand to revise their labor agreement was supported by the union legal counsel Natalia Sokolova. She encouraged the local workers to fight for equality with the foreign national employees. However, the court construed the facts of comparing salaries and discussing the wage rates as the incitement of social hatred. Later in August of 2011, Sokolova was sentenced to 6 years. It doesn't seem clear why would they be so indifferent towards their own employees who were on a hunger strike since May 8th. They worked at hazardous locations every day. They were not examined by physicians. How could they be so indifferent and callous? The court-appointed philological and psychological examination revealed certain signs of inciting social hatred in Sokolova's speech, while the independent experts, philologists from Adilsos International Fund failed to trace these signs. How would you define the incitement of social hatred? A direct and immediate threat aimed against the members of a particular social group. The employer refusing to address the issues of his workers, who in turn publicize the facts that they are being ignored, is one thing. But if we are talking about the murder attempt, discrimination or other illegal actions against the employer who represents a particular social group, then it is a completely different subject. Most of the examinations in the criminal case against Vladimir Kozlov, Serik Sapargali and Akshan Ataminov are conducted by officers of Forensic Science Center of the Ministry of Justice. They concluded that defendants were instigating the overthrow of constitutional order and inciting the social hatred by resorting to such words as turmoil, feast and aid. Forensic linguistic analysis is performed by linguists, political experts and psychologists and is quite an important line of evidence for prosecution in the case of inciting social, national and religious hatred. However, the experts claim these examinations to be most biased. The expertise and morals of these people are quite low. We all know what kind of experts they are. They could also easily interpret even these words as incitement of social hatred against the experts. The legal expert Daulet Zhumabekov is very familiar with the Article 164. In 2009, he defended the rights of Kuwait Corporation workers who weren't receiving their salaries in 4 months. As a result, he was charged with inciting social hatred himself. This article is an ultimate tool against the freedom of speech. You can't breathe a word of criticism directed towards the authorities or government officials of any kind. Otherwise, if you speak against the prosecutor, you're taking a great deal of risk of being charged with incitement of social hatred against the social group of prosecutors. Yet there is no clear legal description of what should be considered as signs of the social hatred instigation in the Criminal Code of Kazakhstan. Hence, according to human rights activists, instigating a criminal case under Article 164 is a nonsense. This wording has been introduced into the legislation as an attempt to overcome the Soviet past in terms of social classification, inequality and exploitation of the working class and so on. However, this is rather a political component that appears in the criminal law after the country became independent. This trial has nothing to do with the charges brought against the defendants. I'm fully confident that this trial is clearly directed against the opposition and the democratic development. On a trial in Aktau, the prosecution is trying to prove that defendants were inciting social hatred between workers and the authorities, while the fact that authorities are the separate social group has surprised many people. We've prevented such an article in Russia. We, the human rights activists of Russia, appealed to the Supreme Court when some bloggers just started being charged with this article. We've managed to have the Supreme Court define that authorities cannot be considered a social group. This made it impossible to charge people with inciting social hatred against the authorities. It is not illegal to criticize the government officials. This is what opposition does, but that's a completely different political level. The authority is causing the social hatred itself. In 20 years, it has established a social inequality in Kazakhstan with extremely rich and very poor people. It allowed for managers of Samruk-Kazana and Kazmunaygas to earn a lot of money, whereas the oil workers are bound to an impoverished existence. They are building skyscrapers in Astana while there are no decent schools and kindergartens in Zhanaozen. During the Soviet regime in the 30s, the undesirables were charged with counter-revolutionary activities. In the 60s, with anti-Soviet propaganda. While the Article 164, the incitement of social hatred, is what they charge them with in Kazakhstan these days.
Британские издания напечатали очередные откровения.
British press published new revelations of Kazakh Cinderella, the 30-year-old Goga Ashkenazi, formerly Perkalieva. On top of her gold mines and supplier firms for oil companies, the Oxford graduate now owns a French fashion brand. This busy life couldn't prevent her from becoming a mother for the second time.
Все это не помешало ей стать во второй раз мамой.
An epic saga about the Kazakh president's happy family titled Pride and Grandchildren appeared in an internet journal called Dialogue. One of the main characters is the president's grandson, Altai. The publication notes that he is one of Nursultan Nazarbayev's favorites. The photograph depicts Altai with his parents, Dinara and Timur Kulibayevs. It was taken after he earned a bachelor's degree from one of London's universities. Grandpa Nursultan is absent in the photograph, but as informed sources claim, he was present at his grandson's graduation ceremony. Nursultan Abishevich arrived in London for the Olympic Games opening ceremony, but he temporarily left behind his state affairs for his grandson, although as sources claim, he was there not only for him. Nursultan Abishevich's presence was meant to strengthen Dinara and Timur's marital ties, or rather reunite the pair after their relationship soured in light of news that Timur had a second family and a growing son, Adam. Even Russian television, which usually cajoles the Nazarbayev family in any which way it can, could not resist from demonstrating Adam and his mother to millions of viewers. Following his family life, Timur's career began going downhill after he seriously considered becoming the next father of the nation. Timur Kulibayev was forced to quit all his government posts after the shooting of innocent citizens in Zhanaozen, although our sources say the real reason for these resignations was different altogether. Late last year, it became known that Goga was expecting a second son. The family could not forgive Timur this time. Timur was able to regain the trust of his father-in-law only after presenting documents proving he is not the father. The family believed Timur, and the photo set along with the article and dialogue were meant to seal the reconstructed relationship. What the organizers of this repentance failed to consider was Goga's character. The socialite and British media darling voiced her own version of the events, for which she chose Hello magazine, Britain's premier fashion publication, which previously publicized Goga's private confessions. Incidentally, news of the birth of Goga and Timur's second son was made public in this magazine. It caused quite a stir in Astana. I do not consider myself a single mother. The concept never crossed my mind. He has a father and a mother. He may not have a traditional family, but nevertheless he is surrounded by people who love him. This time Ashkenazi decided to delve into detail about her preparations to become a mother. First she had to relocate from fashionable London to Italy and move into Villa Mangiacane. It is a castle built in the 15th century by the Machiavelli family. It contains 28 rooms and a view of Florence's cathedral church. In ordinary times the villa functions as a luxurious hotel. Goga lived there alone when she was expecting her second child. These living conditions were arranged by the newborn's father. Goga makes no secret of who it is. Timur Kulibayev, father of her two children and a good friend, is how she defines the status of the Kazakh president's son-in-law. The readers are immediately reminded that Ashkenazi's friend and her children's father is Nursultan Nazarbayev's most likely successor. Goga admits that she had arranged everything with Timur as it should be. Journalists did not dwell on the subject, and we are now left to wonder what is hidden behind that mysterious phrase. My sister is a very open person. If she's in love, then she's in love with all her heart. Just like in Rosenbaum's song, love if you love, shoot if you shoot. That is who she is. She fell in love and she does not care. Either way, right after the birth of her second son, Goga unexpectedly became the owner of a company which also owns the old French brand Vionnet. As they say, it was a gift for having a second son. To wit, Goga received a luxurious house in London as compensation for her first son. On the same day as her interview with Hello magazine, Goga's family was eagerly awaiting the arrival of a high guest. A festive fluster was in the air, and the homeowner was discussing a romantic dinner for two with her butler. Judging by the date of the interview, the visit was timed almost perfectly with the photo shoot depicting the loving family of Timur and Dinara. After all, everything was arranged as it should be.
Вы смотрели...
This was Vlast KZ on KPLUS channel. As always, we review all the latest trends, highlights and personalities of the past week. Goodbye.
До новых встреч.